I'm Bryan Gmyrek, and I'm presenting a talk about Moose called Dr. Strange Moose, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Perl. Obviously, it's a joke on that movie, but it's also kind of true. It's like, when I was learning Perl and doing different, also using like C++ and different things, and then thinking about what languages I might use more, I started getting frustrated about some of the things about Perl that are just so old school, like shifting variables and dealing with ugly looking objects and stuff. So anyway, then I discovered Moose a few years ago or whatever and said, okay, this is cool. If people can make Perl do this, then I like Perl, or I love Perl. All right. So a little bit more about me. I don't know, it seems like when I was looking at the internet, a lot of the talks I found about Moose were like by people who are like part of the Moose cabal, or they're experts in Moose, or they wrote Moose, and I'm sitting there going, well, I'm not one of those guys. I'm not like world's foremost expert on how exactly you should define your objects and all that stuff, but I like Moose, and one of the reasons why I like it is it makes it so that stuff doesn't matter as much. You don't have to try to figure out how it should work. It gives you a more standardized framework for how to go about doing object-y stuff in Perl. And like I said here, an ex-particle physicist, or I like to call myself retired. Reached 31. I hadn't discovered any new laws of physics before the age of 30, so it was like all over. And I learned Perl because I got sick of doing stuff over and over again in grad school. And I also think The Jerk is the funniest movie ever.
I have a question. So
yes.
When you learned that you can drop A out of Perl, you could also drop I out of movie?
Oh, did I do that? Good. I meant to do that. There's too many letters. I don't like vowels. Like you noticed in my name, I try to keep as many. I had to keep the E, or else, no one could pronounce it. So, anyway. So I want to write this talk, but I haven't been using Moose a lot lately because I use a different type of object system that's specific to Liquid Web. But anyway, I want to give this talk more about Moose, and also, but then I was like, I'm going to start talking about it, and I'm going to be like rusty, so that'll be really stupid. So I should like write something, with it, so that I can be reminded of some of this stuff about it. So I said, well, I hate trying to write talks, so I should just like write a talk that writes itself and use Moose to do it. So that's kind of what I did for this talk, and I'll talk more about how that's working later. But anyway, I thought that was very meta, a talk about a talk that writes itself or whatnot. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen, this is Vivian from The Young Ones. Highly recommended. Has anyone seen this? Yeah. It says very metal on the back of his jacket, so references you have to explain are the best. All right. So there are bugs. So this is output from the code. So there are bugs that I haven't fixed. So, it output this HTML, and don't want to touch it, partly because I hate touching HTML. If I don't have to, if I can make a program do it for me, then I'd rather do that. So there's issues like this where this is running off and I didn't try to do anything to fix it. But anyway, but if you'd like to know more about Moose, Moose, that's what we're talking about, right? This is my explanation for Moose. What Moose does is just like, you know what I mean? It just like does stuff. So it's a meta object system, which is what developers crave. It's got electrolytes and shit, It's like, it's awesome, it's kick-ass. So that's what Moose does. But, it's meta. It's a meta object system because it's a system that it makes objects out of your objects and does stuff. So it uses the power of objects to make objects better, I guess. If you want an actual real explanation, you could ask this guy. Stefan Little, who's clearly a genius because he was a JavaScript developer until 2002, and then he popped out Moose few years later, which makes me feel extremely stupid because I've been using Perl longer than him. So, good job there, and I'm sure he has some more insight. I just threw this in as a great example. A lot of people say they don't want to use Moose because of performance and all that. And this guy, Joel Berger, gave a great talk at YAPC, and he's also a physics dude, so obviously he kicks ass. And anyway, he used Moose. Okay, so there was this really old system that they wanted him to use to simulate his lasers and do all kinds of weird things. And it was like the documentation was literally told him that, you can't, just don't touch this code or look at it wrong. If you need to make it do something, like figure out a way, you can't touch the core code because it'll just break. I don't know, figure it out, So he was like, no. And so anyway, he started writing stuff in Moose and doing all these nice objecty things. And anyway, if you can use, and then he ran the simulation in his talk. If you can use Moose to simulate what's going on with beams shooting down columns and all that crap, then it can't be that bad. Anyway, Mousex Declare is kind of like, it's a Moose extension. So Moose can have extensions, right? Like any good framework or what have you. And Mousex Declare is one of those that makes the code more declarative, which is this big word that makes you sound really smart, I guess. But hopefully, is it working? That's why I put that in there. I was like, declarative. But it just means that, like, you can, instead of always having to say, okay, this is a sub and whatever, you can declare this is a class and this is a method. It's just more declarative. You're telling it exactly what you want it to be. And anyway, it uses this great thing that doesn't come standard with Moose, as far as I know. This method signatures, which you'll see later, is a really cool feature, and it just adds on. So it makes your Moose look cleaner, and it hides some of the stuff. And this is a great talk. I almost decided we might watch a couple minutes of this talk during my talk, because I figured, who cares, right? But there's no sound on this thing, so I can't do that. But you should. So about the 5-minute mark is I would recommend watching the whole thing. But he was very insightful. He basically talked about how, back in the old days, and I don't even remember a code like this, but had to do with when you had to put all your stuff on the stack and pull it off, and that's how you handled all your variables and doing all that. But in Perl, we don't have to deal with the stack exactly and everything, but every time you have a stupid subroutine, you have to frickin' say, like, I want, okay, my self equals shift, my arguments equals shift. Let me shift all this stuff off. Like, why do I have to do all this? And he explains that a lot better than that.
You could watch it and you could comment it as...
Exactly. Yeah. Could be like an extended, my commentary. This is the funny part. He is pretty funny. But anyway, this, what Mousex Declare does is like even more like it just sweeps all the crap that you don't like about Perl under the rug and like stomps it down and makes your program slightly slower, but who cares, right? I mean, it's awesome. So, but anyway, it means you can focus on writing object-oriented Perl. Like that's what, if you're using Moose, that's what you want to do. And obviously we've got the dude here and his buddy. Hey kids, thanks to Mousex Declare, you never have to shift yourself again. But this is actually more has to do with the method signatures, because you can use method signatures without using Mousex Declare. But anyway, it's not what I wrote. So, but anyway, to me, like I said in the beginning, the fact that you can do all this stuff with Perl, and yes, there are situations where you don't want to do that, and maybe you just want to use core Perl and XS because that's so much faster. Like, you still can. That's the cool thing about Perl, right? Is you still do that, but if you have the chance or whatever, you can choose the different levels of abstraction you like, the different levels of cleanliness. Basically, you give up cleanliness for speed when you use the different types of Moose extensions and all that. But it's up to you, and it means that you could write code that looks cooler than Ruby in Perl. So, here's this little. This is this quick reference sheet I had made for myself a few years ago, and I just did a screen capture of part of it, so I could just show you. I didn't want to do all the work of trying to like create a class or a package or whatever, and then doing it in normal Perl, in Moose, and in Mousex Declare. It's kind of what this is. It's not perfect though. You see the difference. This being the Mousex Declare part, obviously. This does more than this does. So this would be actually longer if it actually did everything that this code does. So this, it does type checking. It's letting you pass in name parameters, all that stuff. So it's doing stuff that's not even done over here. So if this actually did everything this did, it'd probably be twice as long. So, that's one of the good reasons to use it. And you can see how it's even so much cleaner. This is Moose, and everybody thinks Moose is so great. I think Moose is great, except there's still all this junk in here, and I didn't even include all of it. Like you should be doing at the end, make immutable, and all kinds of other stuff that you need to do in Moose. Whereas here, Mousex Declare, you just use that in the beginning, and it does that stuff for you. You don't have to remember, like, oh, I forgot to make it immutable, and now it's slower, what have you. A little bit more about Mousex Declare. I talked about it a lot because I like it a lot. Like I said, it gives you method signatures, gives you keywords like class. Otherwise, you don't have those. You can't do this without Mousex Declare. You can't say like instead of doing all this, you have to, like in Moose, you have to say, oh, it extends animal. I'm going to say that on a separate line. All that stuff here, you're just like class cow extends animal. So it just looks slick. I pretty much covered this in the previous slide. You don't have to end your file with 1. It does the namespace auto clean that all the cool kids do, which is just something you do in Moose. It cleans up stuff that moose droppings that get left around. If you don't do it, it's really bad. I don't know. I don't care. I don't want to know. I don't want to.
Removes all the methods that Moose imported into your namespace.
See, he knows. He's the smart one. He knows all that stuff. I don't know. I'm like, it just does something. It's bad if you don't do it. But with Mousex Declare, I don't have to know why. I should remember to do it because I don't have to remember to do it. So, anyway, so I was supposed to write this talk, and I was like, well, how should I write the talk? Because last time I wrote a talk, well, I don't know, but I used to have to write. So anyone ever used LaTeX, the text types that exist? I used to write talks in that. I used to have to write talks in what's the stupid Microsoft one? PowerPoint, because my advisor would write part of the talk in PowerPoint and give it to me and be like, finish it or whatever. So, so I would do that. He's a great guy, by the way. But he did use PowerPoint, which I'll never understand. But I think it's because he didn't want to care about it, and it seemed easy to just use it. Even though we all use Linux, it didn't make a lot of sense. It was like, there's that one Windows machine on the 3rd floor. Why don't you go there and write the talk on that? But anyway, so I hated that. I actually don't hate LaTeX, but it's just way more complicated than you really need for like doing some slides or something. There's a lot of opportunities to shoot yourself in the foot and all that stuff. So anyway, I was like, I'll be different and I'll just write my own. And part of it was Doug made a joke. I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about on last Friday. And he was like, why don't you write a slide presenter in Moose? And I was like, yeah, that's funny. And by Monday, I was like, crap, I think I'll write a slide presenter in Moose. Anyway, like I said, the downsides of all this stuff is even if you like HTML, that's great. And so you can just write your talk in HTML. There's this great thing, S5, which I asked Doug, like, what are people using? Because I'd never used it. But that's all the look and feel of this, and all these navigation things and all that are from this S5 system, or whatever you call it. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cool, but then I went in and I was like, I have to edit HTML. This sucks. I'm not doing this, And part of why is, I'm like watching people's talks to get inspiration, and I'm just seeing a lot of examples of someone going like, oh, this code is broken, sorry. And I was like, what if I could just have code in my talk that I had run tests on, But then I'd have to like remember to put it back in if I ever changed it, and I'd have to like copy and paste stuff, and that would suck, So I said I won't do that. And adding images, I think. To me, I love the images. I try to get one on every slide. I think I have one on every slide where it would fit, and then I still have ones on slides where it doesn't fit. It's just cool. Because that way, if you think the talk is boring, you can just like stare at Frank Zappa and be like, he's weird. So just, so I like to put the in. But anyway, I wanted that to be easy. I didn't really care if it was perfect as long as it was easy, So I buckled down and got some advanced O design with pencil and paper, and like wrote it should like do this and stuff. But the good part was, since I knew I'd be using Mousex Declaration, and like you're not gonna write some crap thing in it where you like start dumping everything into one class where it shouldn't be, although I probably did that a little bit. But you know, I knew it would encourage and make it easy. Like, you know, okay, sometimes it can suck to be like, okay, I'm gonna have different class for this and different, like I have to remember to do the auto clean thing, and or you know, whatever, and you start going, forget it, I'll just write a script. You know. So anyway, it was good that I knew I'd be using Mousex Declaration, because I said, okay, I'm going to do these objects, and it's not going to be hard to make the new one. And anyway, and the design I'm sure isn't perfect. I mean, it's like, I don't know what the optimal number of files to have, and should this be a class, or should it just be a method in this class, because it doesn't do that much. Like, I don't know. You know, it's just the closest thing I could come to something that made sense. Anyway, so I started this thing on Monday, and I think it's pretty cool now. Like, I've never uploaded a module to CPAN, but I think I'm probably gonna, because I just thought it was cool. It spits out a talk. You know, you make a YAML file, and basically what you do, you grab a S5 template, like Doug has one if you want to give a talk here, and then you grab, or you can grab one off his website or wherever. You make a YAML config file, which I'll show later. In your code, like in your actual source code, and you don't have to write a talk that writes itself. You just have some code that you wanted to talk about. You know, so in that code, you have to edit the source code of your code to do this. So one of the improvements that I'd like to see is and it'd be pretty easy, I guess. You just give it the file and the numbers. I want the snippet to be this file. If it's like a library file or something that's not changing a lot, you could just do that, and it would grab it from there. But anyway, whatever you have inside here, it'll pull that out, and it'll let you get at it with that name in your YAML file. So you could just say, I want to show this snippet here, and it just gets it. And you add some meta info to your slide, like what your name is and all that crap. Jivit, would you like to know more? But there's more. This would be your script. So you'd have your YAML file. This is the actual script that generated this presentation. So this was pulled, it was running, and then as it was running, it read the file system and pulled in itself and grabbed the snippet out and then put it there. But anyway, your script, you just put that in a .pl file, and that would be your script. So you'd put what your input file is. That would be your YAML file, obviously. What your template file is. This would be, if you use S5, which I guess you have to for this now, although I'm hoping that it'll be expanded to use different presentation systems. But if you use S5, it'll come with like an index.html in there. So just rename that to something else, just to index.base.html or index.foo, or I don't care, you know. Name it something, and then tell it what you want it to output to, which would probably be the index.html, but if for some reason you want it to be different, you could. And because I suck at CSS and junk like that, I just ended up giving up, and there's this file less.css or late.css. Some .css that you have to use for the syntax highlighting. It'll all work, you just won't get the pretty syntax highlighting. I had trouble, there's like the stuff in S5 about including CSS was weird, and I tried to just include the file, but it didn't work, and I think it's because I didn't say this is for presentation mode and have a different, so I don't know. I just appended it to the one that's for presentation mode and hope for the best, and it works. That's why it's syntax highlighted. This uses this really cool Perl module called text vim color, which I was like, oh my god, I need like a syntax highlighter that'll actually work and like not cause me a lot of grief, you know. And so I found that, and it works. It's slow, and I don't know if it's because I have a bug in how I'm using it, or if it's just really freaking slow. But it's really freaking slow. But who cares? I mean, you're compiling your talk. It takes a few seconds or whatever. Big deal, I guess. But anyway, it creates really pretty looking markup. Any questions so far?
So this, when you run it in your script, it generates this file, or folder full of files, or?
Yeah, no, so it just generates, well, I'll show you, it'll just, what it ends up outputting, it has it all in memory or whatever, and it'll, and then it takes, it actually uses Mojo, it's trendy. I was like, this has to be trendy, I have to do something really trendy. So it uses a Mooselicious module. If you heard about Mooselicious, if you haven't, it's really cool. There was a talk about it at YAPC, and it was like, where's the Kool-Aid? This is cool. It's like, you should go to their webpage. Ugh. There we go. It's hard to navigate when you're nervous. See how shiny it is? It's like,
and rainbow?
yeah, freaking rainbows and yeah, the web in a box. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. But oh crap, I just downloaded it. But anyway, during the talk, he oh, look at Joel Berger. See, I knew it'd be cool if Joel Berger uses it. It must be cool. But anyway, during the talk, he said he, showed it as part of it. He was talking about Mojo, which is like, it's just really easy to use web framework thing. You just say, like, you can run it on your machine. You say, like, your app can just be like 4 lines where you just say what the URL handler is, like it's a / and then you say handle that with this, and you give it, a module or whatever, and it'll just do that. And you can do all kinds of stuff with that sort of logic. And but anyway, they write everything themselves because they're so much cooler than everyone else in the world that they just, Mojo is like all written, by Mojo people. But anyway, their DOM parser I thought looked pretty cool. Like it works a lot. Like you can use CSS selectors. You can say like this thing. I didn't use like barely any of the features of this. I didn't need it at all. I just thought it'd be awesome. Okay, but it did make it easy. So that's, like I said, I wanted it to be fast and easy and to have it done by today, because that would be better than not having it done by today. Yeah, exactly. So it's like kind of cool because if you're familiar with using all the jQuery and that sort of thing, it just does that, and it was pretty slick, I thought. So here you are appending content, and you're doing all kinds of finding and eaching stuff and all that stuff. So I know it looked pretty cool, and I thought if I end up needing some of these more advanced features, I'll have them. If I don't, just like it'll be easy for me to just append content or whatever. So basically, it builds up your information into a Mojo DOM object. And then at the end, it just calls, like, I forget what the call is. It's like, your variable arrow content or something, So it just, at the end, you get this HTML back out. So that's what it does. So yeah, it does all the stuff Magic it's doing and then just spits out one file. So, but the YAML config file. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh yeah, this thing is going to be nasty. Like he's saying, oh, I wanted the talk to be easier, so like I put it. But this is it. This is the basic idea. This YAML is, well, this was not dynamic. I cheated. This was not dynamically generated. This image file, this is just an image file, okay, because I didn't feel like marking up my YAML with a snippet thing because I didn't even know if that would break it, and I didn't care to find out. I was just like, I don't care. So this is a cheat. This is just, this is a screenshot. But this is the actual, I didn't change it. So this is the same YAML that was used to generate this slide and this slide. So you see here, there's the title. But wait, there's more. Your background. And it was simple, but it kind of sucks because it doesn't let you tell anything about that background. Like, do you want this one to be like 50% bigger than most of your other ones? It's also not really a background. It's actually, that was my original plan, was to have it be like a background, but it's actually just like the image here is just like a div that's floated right, and that's probably why this sucks. But I was just like, whatever, and that's why. But it was turned out well because then it would wrap around that div. I guess in some places. This is formatted, I guess, so it doesn't wrap, obviously. But so there you go. You say you want snippet. Now this in the code, how to use presentation builder. I don't even remember where that is in the code. Oh yeah, that would be in the script. So it's also trendy because it's on GitHub. And you can go there. If you can't get enough of this talk later, you can just go home and download a zip or do a git pull on it, and you'd have the talk. The talk is in Oh crap. Nobody follows me because I suck. Oh yeah, I try to put documentation, but it's like way down there. To view the talk, grab the code and open this file in your browser, presentation builder tdataindex.html, because the file is generated by Perl tests. So it can be. I have tests, and at the end they run the generate command and it generates it, or I just have a script that I can call so I don't have to run all the tests. But I've generally been running the tests. That way if I broke something, it's like, it gets tested. So yeah, let me see what else. What was I going to show? I was going to show the actual thing. Distracting myself again. All right. Oh yeah, here we go. So there's the snippet. This, run this guy right here, run this script, and it sees the snippet. It's actually I just did a thing where you tell it the directory. So you have to tell it where to start looking for crap. It doesn't search your whole, at least I hope it doesn't search your whole file structure, but you tell it where to start looking, and then based on there, it looks for all files that are like .star, p star, whatever, any files that might be a Perl. It's not very advanced, like I said, quick and dirty. Anyway, in the code, and then it pulls those in, and then it does a file slurp on each one, and runs this crazy regex to find all the snippets and puts them all in a hash and somewhere in the object. And anyway, this ends up being one of the snippets, because while it's running, it pulls the copy of itself that's statically on the drive and pulls this in, gets the snippet out, and then it prints it there. So that would be like where that came from. Did that answer your question? Good. Okay. Well, now that I've explained how the whole thing works, I'm going home. No, I have more slides, so you have to keep sitting there. Sorry. So anyway, that's it. But I really liked the, let me see. I liked that because it was so easy. I liked that because it was easy. This is pretty easy, but this is where I cheated and I have like messy stuff in there. Like in some parts of the... Okay, here it is. This is the whole YAML file. So that's the whole talk. But I did stuff in there which like I'd rather have it do. Let me see. Or I'd rather handle in a better way. Here's an example. Oh yeah, here's some of my wonderful div font size equals 0. Because I don't want to go to the CSS and edit it, so I just did that. Just stupid. You should be able to have some way to say like, okay, these points should be smaller. I don't know. It doesn't do that though. And also, if you wanted to include like a bunch of HTML in here, that would kind of suck. And it'd be cool if it was like type file, and then it would just go read in whatever's in that file. You could just have a directory like under where you are somewhere and tell it files I might want are in this directory, and then it would, if you put type file in there, it would just pull in the whole darn file and dump that into your talk. So something like that could be cool, I guess. But it doesn't do that. All right. Oh. Stupid thing. Okay, enough of that. All right, so on to the Moose. I was supposed to talk about Moose, and that's part of why I was like, what if I write something, I'll just end up talking about that, and then I won't be talking about Moose. These are the conversations that I have with myself at 3 in the morning. But anyway, I was like, screw it. I'll just do it. So I did that, but now I am actually going to talk about Moose. What time is it? Okay. So there's a lot of stuff. Moose does a lot of stuff, and I don't do it all. And because this wasn't a super complicated, I think it's like 8 files or something. Let's see. Yeah, here's all the actual source code files. I can show them doing like fast motion. Read. No, but anyway, these are all the source files. So I mean, it's not the most advanced thing. One thing, let me see. One thing I'll notice, well, I won't note that right now. I'll talk about that later. But anyway, here it is. It's not a huge project, so I don't use like all the advanced features that Moose, has to offer. So I didn't talk about the ones I didn't use. But it does cool stuff like roles and all that. And that's actually one of the things that I liked about Moose. If like the guys who write Moose are like people where I come from in New England or near Boston area would say wicked smat, So like they're wicked smat. So if there's something that's like a good idea, they've probably done it. So if you just like keep up with what's going on with Moose and like they're like, hey, like roles are cool, or it's probably really dated, but whatever it is, then it's like if they're doing it, you should probably be doing it. Whether you're like using Moose or not, it's probably a good idea. So that's one thing I like about it. Even if you don't use all the features, like they're there, and if you just like start reading more of the documentation or just watching talks is great. And see people like, oh, they're using this advanced feature there. I'll do that too. So anyway, we're just going to cover some of the stuff that you'll use a lot. Has, so that's like, well, I'll cover it later. I'm just going to say it now. Objects, method modifiers, method signatures, type constraints, coercions, and Moose autobox. I can never keep this. I hope I keep these straight and stuff because I love them and I know what they do and what they are, but it's like, that's when you start to try to sound smart when you're like, it's a method modifier of a method signature. Like, I don't know, it's cool, All right, so has is probably the thing that you'll use the most because you're doing all things with classes, and this is not Mousex Declare specific. I'll try to point out those things that are. This like comes with Moose. It does all this. So the simple thing, like you saw my example of, where I just used like 2 of those, and I probably didn't even need to use one of them, but it does all this stuff, and so you can RTFM and find out what it all does, I guess, but. Yeah, so unless you have class data, it keeps you'll never want to do this again. Like there'll be no reason to ever do that again because it's so damn easy to make, the class actually have data that you'll never be like, well, I'll just like cheat this time and put it in. I don't even know if I've never tried it when I was using Moose because I would just feel really stupid. So you don't have to do that, and it avoids obviously some issues. Does type checking, read-write access, lazy building, which I'll get to more, and more. This is one of the random funny images I found. This actually, I wasn't the one who had to Photoshop this. Someone figured Biden was like doing the Moose, and that was worthy of punditkitchen.com, I guess. I hope they don't sue me now. It's like such an awesome image. But anyway, here's a simple example, in a way, of has. So this is pretty short. It's just has. It is a means, what is this thing, right? Like, duh. It just means it is a that. And a lot of times this would just be like an array ref, So you don't have to then check in when you're using it, is this thing actually an array ref and all that stuff. It'll make sure that it is, and it'll tell you if it's not. You could say it is, like what can I do to it? Can I read it? Can I write it? If you put RO, there will be read-only, which would mean that you could only specify it when you call the class. So inside new, if it was read-only, you can't then later modify it, which is cool because there's a lot of things. I didn't take the time to think that hard about things in my code for this. Like, should this be read-only, or like how strict should I be? But it's there. I can go change it if I'm like, well, I'm getting bugs now. And you can give it a default, which is cool. This is a little bit of like stuff from that should have, like I wish was under the rug, but it's not. I'm sure there's a really good reason for it. But so even if you just want to say its default is an empty array, you can't just say that. It just always takes a subroutine. And I think there is a good reason. I don't remember what the heck it is, but there it is. You do it. You make that mistake once, and it yells at you, and from then on, you just always say sub when you want to put a default in there. But that'll mean, yeah, obviously when you call it, that'll be its default, which I found is nice, especially with things that you want to write, because it's like, what if you just want to call, like dereference it? You're like, I'm going to use this thing, and I want to dereference it and try and do something to it. Well, if you didn't have some kind of a default, it would say, hey, this isn't even an array ref. And what are you doing trying to dereference it? Like that makes sure you don't have that problem. So it's kind of cool. Here's an example of a bug that unfortunately obscures Buffy's face. I almost did fix this one, Doug will tell you. I was like, I might have to fix this. But it's okay. We'll deal with it. But like I said, it makes Perl all object-y and stuff. One of the guy in that, I think it was the Piers colleague in his talk, said that he was, like he's a Ruby programmer who obviously likes Perl. I don't know what his background is, but he was at work and working on some Perl for one of his, doing some side project or whatnot, and one of his friends was like, that's not Perl. He said, that bloody well is, So it makes Perl like object-y, and it's going to make like all the Ruby people and all that jealous, because they're going to be like, hey, you guys can't, you know? You'd be like, ha, you were wrong. No. I've actually never used Ruby, so I don't know. But anyway, here I did, well, okay, here's an example of, it depends on how pedantic you want to be. You can have your has be like I had there, where you put more new lines in. It just, I guess it makes it a little bit easier to read, more for like a presentation. But I partly did this one on purpose like this, even though it obscured Buffy's face, to show you that, like, I think in production code or whatever, when you don't have a lot going on here, I don't see a real reason to wrap it and make it take like 5 lines or whatever. If you're doing like a more advanced stuff in it, yeah, like fine, spread it out so people can see it and it's not like way over there. But all I'm doing here is saying what it is, that it's read-only, that it's required or not. I mean, Anyway, this is a whole class. I'm not missing a 1 at the end. I'm not missing a namespace auto clean. I'm not like missing like this, dude, did you not know about this cool thing? Like, I'm not missing any of that. This is it. This is your file. I'll get to this in a little bit. So Mousex Declare comes with something called Mousex method signatures. So that was one of the things I liked about Mousex Declare when I used it a few years ago. And I don't know what the history of all this is because I just used it, but apparently there's, it's one of the things that slows Mousex Declare down. I think was it Randall Schwartz, or I should probably be careful in getting my sources right. But anyway, one of those really smart dudes that you probably know their names was like, hey man, we can make like a plug-in replacement for that. If you just use this module in your Mousex Declare code, it'll like make it faster and better. And like, I was like, okay, that sounds good. Well, actually, because I saw, where is he? Did I not bring it up? Anyway, I saw Joel Berger do it. Where? He should be somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, I saw him doing it, and I was like, what? That must be important, And so I was like, okay, it is faster, and it's good. So there's an example of the class. You say class presentation builder slide section, and this would be in a file called, presentation directory structure, obviously, presentation builder slide section.pm. And here I did something which I didn't have to do, but I was just, I hate having to remember to do stuff. So I just decided to do this. I'll show you this later. This is the, Moose lets you define your own types. So obviously this is saying this has to be a string, right? You can define your own things and have like a regex to determine if it passes or not. And I made a class to do that, so I didn't have to specifically do them in different files. I don't use any of those here, but I left it in. I could go take it out, I guess, later. And you can see this keyword. It lets you use like a method keyword instead of sub, obviously. It also provides a func keyword, which I never use. But anyway, the method keyword is cool because, do you see what it does? It gives you self for free. You don't have to shift yourself. So it's cool. You never have to remember to shift yourself or whatever. It's just there. So any questions on that there? Oh, okay, good. Here's one that's just a little bit, here's an example of another thing gives you can say this class, presentation builder slide section snippet, which is where you start to go, oh God, like I have to write another one of these or what have you. But at least it makes it easy to do that because you can just say, then without, you don't have to remember to put a, shift onto ISA or whatever. You just say like it extends presentation builder slide section and you're done, just copy paste or something. And this is the part that takes the snippets. So it uses the text Vim color. It takes the snippets and makes them look cool. This is also overriding. So you see there's a special keyword here. You just say like this overrides that. So you're just declaring, you're being declarative, I guess. And you're saying this guy overrides the content from its previous. And that gives you something, that gives you this for free. Because you can just do what you wanted and then return super. and it'll then pass it up to its parent. What else? I think that was it. Okay, so on to lazy build. This is really cool. I ended up using it a lot, like probably too much. You know, when you're like one of those features and you start using it, you're like, I think I'm probably using this too much, you know? Because like maybe there's a different way to do this, but it's just like it makes it so easy. So here's another example of a shifting over too far. But if you have something has data, could be anything. Say lazy build one. Now what lazy means is don't try to construct this thing. Instead of just saying default, if you just give it a default, it would just, at the time your object is created, it gives everything its default, you know. Lazy means like, be lazy and wait until you like need it or something, you know. So it doesn't, but it's cool, and that ends up being really cool. Like if you used lazy, you mentioned it earlier. Yeah, it's cool, right? You just like, usually it should be lazy, unless it's something simple like that one I showed where its default is that it's an empty array. Like, yeah, obviously don't lazy build the stupid empty array later. But like a lot of things, by doing this, you like avoid bugs because it's just not gonna, like what if that depended on something else that doesn't exist yet? You know, you've either created it by then or it's a bug that you haven't created by then, or you could handle that in here. Like if it relied on some data, which I ended up doing that. You know, it's like, oh, well, when you get here, you got to do something. It's like, oh, let's like make sure that that thing is there, and then it'll get that data, you know, when you need it. Yeah, I already mentioned that. Method modifiers. So before, around, and after, these are really cool too. They'd be more useful in a more advanced code base than what I have here. They're basically like before means, okay, let's say you've got some hierarchy of your, you've got some hierarchy of files, and like this extends that, and this extends that, and then somewhere in there you're like, well, oh man, if it's this subtype, it should like do this before, you know, it should do something to something before it actually gets that value. So it lets you do that. You don't have to like try to figure out how to, I think Matt Trout, who wrote Moo, he talked about this well. He did this thing where so Moo is this lighter weight version. Well, it's not a lighter weight version. It's a separate module, and it's like he calls it almost but not quite 2/3 of Moose. And so it's like Moose, except for it doesn't. Somehow he does like a lot of the stuff Moose does, and he doesn't use a meta object system or something. And it's really lightweight, but it's completely compatible. Like if you have Moo object and then you use it in a Moose thing, it'll like turn it into a moose. It's just really, the guy is really smart. And like in his tests, he said he did a bunch of different things and even like then use it in mouse and tried to see if it could go back. And so he's pretty smart. His talk was pretty good. I think I linked to it somewhere, or also put the links in there. What was I talking about? After, before? Something made me think of that. I don't know. Anyway, he was talking about how, before he wrote Moo, he had given up on writing Moose because clients didn't want it. They wanted things that didn't use Moose, so they would just not have any dependencies and that kind of crap. So he had spent a couple of years writing stuff with just pure Perl objects and doing new and all that crap. And he was like apparently getting ready to, you know, just freak out because he was sick of it. And he was trying to implement these features himself, like around and before and after and all that. And it was like, so with every darn class he had to remember to like, well, how would I have to write the parent class so it allowed me to do something before the parts of it ran and all that. And it was like, it just sucked. So he instead wrote 2/3 of Moose so he didn't have to keep doing that. Anyway, these are really cool because if you're doing more advanced stuff, you'll need them. And they also this is one thing that this exists in Moose and Mousex Declare, but it's cleaner in Mousex Declare. Like everything is. That's one of the things it does, just cleans up how everything looks and makes it shiny. So if it was like in normal Moose, it just wouldn't be so clean. Like this would be called as a string, and then you'd have like a equals right angle bracket or whatever you call that, a fat arrow. I don't know. Fat comma. Stupid fat commas. Anyway, another one of those words that, anyway, you'd have to do that. But this looks really clean. You're just declaring, I want this to happen around content, and it gives you this magical orig variable, that's the original method. So you could call that anywhere inside this one. And so what I did here was I said, this is in the, that's another feature I need to add. I forgot to add the source of the snippet. Like, I was originally going to do that, but I didn't. So, I have to try to remember where these came from. But this came from like the slide.pm, where then you're saying, okay, I want this slide's content. I'm done fiddling with its DOM and all that crap. Just like give me its HTML. And so what it does is, this is if it's a S5, like treat it specially, do this stuff. And I had to hack S5. So first they did this, and then none of my, like, oh my God, now they're not. Of course they're not working now. I swear they worked before. Well, I broke it again. Oh, there we go. My titles. So like wasn't getting the titles. And all I was doing was, because what I do is if you have a background, I put that in as a div. Div style equals float right, image class equals blah. And then I put the image path to your image there. So I just did that, and then the titles were showing up. And I'm like, why the hell he must rely on the first thing in your div being an H1. And apparently he does, because then it worked. I put an H1, and I said, how am I going to put the H1 there? Because then it didn't look right. If I put the H1 there, the page looked all messed up. If I just put the H1 before the background, if I put an actual H1 before the background, it would look all messed up, so I just had it display none. There's like a hidden H1 in here, but who cares? So that could be better. I linked to this, so it must be important. Moose manual method modifiers. Okay, here we go, because I didn't talk about them a lot. I just wanted to show you some more examples of, here you go, obviously he's using a before, so before foo, if you did print just about to call foo, then every time you called foo, it would do that. Stupid, but you can imagine there are more advanced things you might want to do. Okay, this is one of those slides where I was like, had the perfect storm of being able to fit as much crap as possible onto it. So I was really happy about that. But this was fun. So method signatures are like, I love them, Did I explain what they are yet? No. Method signatures are they're like has from your methods, because has just works for your class. But that kind of sucks, because part of the whole point of using something like Moose, or especially Mousex Declare, is that you don't want to have to shift myself. So that's what it lets you do. It's I can declare this method, and then I'm saying it takes these arguments. So and this looks like a lot of other programming languages, I guess, that figured this out a long time ago. And so you could say I want a string, or I want a title that's a string. You don't have to say my, it does all that crap for you. And then inside the method, you'll have access to that variable. And you can do various things with different characters there to decide whether it's required. And I didn't do all that for most of these. I just put them together. But let me see. Oh, yeah. But this really bit me. So this is one of the times when at 2 in the morning, I was going, why the hell did I try to write my own talk presenter code for my talk that's in 2 days? Because Mousex method signatures, I mean, God bless it, but it, not only is it apparently slightly slower, but it has has horrible error messages. So I had just forgotten, and like I said, I was rusty, and I hadn't put the col in there. And then I was trying to use this, all my tests were passing up to that point. And I was like, great, this is great. I'm going to have an example of method signatures. Woohoo! And I run the test, and it goes and just explodes. I'll show you what happened. That happened. And it's even worse. It goes off. There's another thing that just needs to be fit. But it just does this horrible. I mean, this is not, my code here is not an advanced object thing. It's pretty low level. And then I get this horrible thing oh my God, my tuple of objects of strings of dicts are not working. I didn't even make a tuple. What the hell? So that sucked. And I was like, this is terrible. And then I remembered, in my panic, I remembered hearing Joel Berger talk about the method signatures modifiers thing. And he said that it gives better error messages. So I frantically tried to install it on my Mac, which sucks sometimes. It's one of the things that sucks about Mac is it's like it can do stuff, but it's not Linux. So, you're like, why doesn't this module just work? And it's like, because Macs are cooler than that module. And it's just like, no matter what I tried, and I was in the source code. I was starting to edit. I was going to edit the C code, the XS of it, to try to fix the errors that it was spitting out. And when you get to that point that it's bad, when you're going to edit the source code C so that it'll freaking install on your machine. So I was like, this is bad. And I finally downloaded like Mac ports, which I've never used, and I got it to install. It wasn't its fault exactly. It was the method signatures modifiers module relies on like data accessor, and that uses XS, and something about my GCC didn't like it, and I didn't have enough time to actually fix it. But it installed it in some weird directory, and then I just literally copied the stupid files into the right Perl directory, and it worked. So anyway, it was worth it though. So, but I've had to figure out how to fix the bug because it took so long. It took me like 2 days to get that to install. Okay, which is more Mac's fault because on a Linux it was just like, here it is, like cpan minus. But I had to figure out what this meant, and that's part of why I was like, this turned out to be good because I could show. Because I remember when I was doing more Mousex Declare a few years ago, that I would see this kind of crap all the time, and I was like, this is the only thing that makes me want to shoot myself about this code, So I have to look at this and then realize that. So and it doesn't even. It's terrible. I mean, it's nice in that it tells you like what you called it with, like that part I like, which this doesn't do. It's less specific, and like it doesn't tell you like what you called it with. It just says, hey, man, it expects one thing, and you like gave it not one thing, So it's simple, but it's almost too simple. But this was just too nasty. I mean, it's like I thought that somehow there must be a tuple in there somewhere. I don't know. It was terrible. So I figured it out somehow, and then I was like, well, I better get this installed so I could see what the error message would be if I had it installed before. So there you have it. Did anybody get this reference that I didn't explain to you already? Today we're going to talk about your colon. What does it look like? It's from Real Genius. When he has it's like the professor and he has his own show, and he's like going to talk. He has to talk about colons apparently. So I thought colons caused me a lot of grief, and obviously they caused him a lot of grief. So again, references you have to explain are the funniest to me. To me that's funny, but weird. So okay, handling stuff. Okay, this is an example of like one of the features which I don't know. I didn't need this feature. So I did cheat a little bit, and I used this feature which I probably didn't need. I think I used it in my tests and stuff to be like, oh look, I used that feature. That's cool. But in more advanced code bases, you do this sort of thing where you have one. Let me see. Here we're saying I have a template thing. It is a presentation builder template. So that's one of the cool things. You can use types or classes as your and then here's the magic thing. It handles array ref DOM. So you're saying that it handles. It's like you said. It's like you declared a class data thing called DOM, and did stuff with it. So it just magically does that for you. So that's one thing. It's good to know, I guess, if you're going to read code that's written with Moose and stuff. You see this, you'll be like, how? I see test calling, self DOM. Like, why is that working? There's no DOM thing in here, but it's because it's doing the magic for you. Anyway, it magically calls this. It delegates that. So when you call self DOM, it actually calls self template DOM and does whatever the heck template it would have done, or does whatever DOM would have done in your other class. So anyway, yeah, I just thought that was cool, or I should talk about something like that. Anyway, some people will spend a lot of time thinking about whether to use Moose or not, but Master Shake mooses whenever he turns, well, it feels like it, and you'll like it. That has nothing to do with this snippet, but I just thought I had to have Master Shake in here somewhere. Okay, so here we go. Constraints, yes, type constraints. So here's an example of where I put, now like I said, you can do all your type constraints in one file, and that's good for your like generic things. Like, okay, I want this to be a string, I want this to be a valid file, I want this to be like something else, Anyway, but I just wanted to show how you could do it inside a class if you wanted to. What's I saying here? Oh no, this is my, sorry. I got this confused with another snippet. You can do all that, but this is my overall types method. So here's just an example of doing a type. It looks a little weird, you know, you're saying like subtype file in quotes as string in quotes where angular thingy return one if whatever. This is just saying I want to do a file that's a subtype of a string. So this is actually saying, okay, this is like just a file name, you know. So it's basically a string, but I'm going to say it's going to be a file name. But then I'm also going to do a check, and actually going to check if that file exists or not on the file system. So it's just an example of that. You know, then whenever you say file in your code, you know, you're not doing anything. You're saying this thing is a file, but it's actually going to check, is it actually there? You know, if that's what you wanted, great. And then I did an image file thing where I just, you know, I showed how you can use a regex to say, I mean, again, this was stupid, right? I said, is it a JPEG, is it a GIF or whatnot? And I didn't actually check if it was, if it existed because I felt like people would put files and all, just refer to images that were in all different directories and all that, and I didn't want to have to deal with the complexity of that. So, and here's another thing. You can say, you can declare a class type. So you can say Mojo DOM is a class type, and I'll show you later why I had to do that, I think. Oh yeah, coercion. So make them an offer they can't refuse. So here's an example of, this is pretty powerful, like probably are like a million ways to shoot yourself in the foot with coercions. But what it does is, like, you say, okay, coerce config file. You basically tell it, all right, this type, if something is, okay, I'm going to have this thing is a config file. And then I say, coerce it if you have to force it to be like you like it, then do it. I should have put Master Shake on this slide. I don't know what I was saying last minute. So this is probably where Master Shake should have gone. So it's like force, all right, you pass in a string, like I don't want a string. Make it into something that I can work with. So what it does, it calls this subroutine, because you say coerce config file from a string via coerce file subroutine. And what that'll do is, what I did here, I just did something stupid. I was like, where should I should like look for files, and I was like, oh man, I gotta put like another config in the YAML, and I didn't feel like doing that at the time. So I just had it look in at ink array, you know, because I was doing stuff in my test directory, and so it could look under there. Well, I was running the file from the local directory, so it would start there and then look in images. So it worked for me. Something more advanced and less stupid should be done there. But the point is, it actually finds it tries to find the file right under there. It's not smart. It doesn't do like a search or, you know, like a deep search under the thing or whatnot. It just is like, is this under any of the directories that are in ink? And if it is, it then gives you the full path to it. So it's just kind of nice. Like now, before you just had like a file name and you weren't sure where it was, and this actually like figures out exactly where it is and then gives you that back. I mean, it's a little bit contrived, but you can do a lot with that. So that way, in your, you know, if you could have this in another class, in that class that contained everything, and then in your class where you're actually like doing the stuff you care about in your code, all you're doing is saying it is a config file, and there's not all that logic. It's like that's somewhere else, and it's all taken care of, hopefully. Am I putting everybody to sleep now? There's less pictures, so it's... All right. Coercing objects. What did I do here? My sections. Yeah, this was like a little bit more advanced thing I tried to do with coercions, where I just said, if I have something called, I'm going to have this thing called sections, and then I'm going to say it is a undef, because so when I call it, it could be empty, but you know, it should be a my sections. It should be either undef or a my sections type, and then coerce it. So then what it does is it says, okay, well, I'm going to, this is how I coerce it. Call coerce my sections, and then do this. And this is one of the things I like about using like Mousex Declare. You can still do this. You can still do things that make, people go, what the hell is that? Because it takes, I could do this in one line instead of I split it up so it's slightly more readable in that one line. The point is you can still do Perly stuff, and to me that's cool because it saves a lot of space and time and all that. So anyway, it coerces it to be a reference to an array of presentation builder slide section of its objects all for you. So it just handles that, and I thought that was kind of cool too. So again, in your actual code where you have like logic going on, you could just have this part has sections, and then it would like handle all that. So you could just pass in, strings, and it would actually end up being objects in there. This is another bug. So right now, when it just gets the snippet, it doesn't then like trim it doesn't trim the tabs or anything. It just grabs the snippet, and what it needs to do is like look for where the furthest leftmost thing find the least number of spaces and then trim all those. But I didn't do that because I didn't feel like it. Anyway, this I want to have an example. I only use this in this one place, even though it does all these cool things. Moose Autobox. You can also use Autobox in standard Perl if you just use Autobox. There was a talk about that at YAPC by the Perl Training Australia people. That was really pretty good. It was pretty interesting. So anyway, but it's cool because then you can do things like, okay, self-list, where list is an array ref, push, and then you can push that back. And then let me see, you've got, there's an example. Here's another example. Or did I copy that? Oh yeah, I did. You can do cooler stuff like this. Print 1 to 10, map, sub, square it, and then join it with a comma, like all in one line. So it's just kind of cool. Use that, and it's like things that don't, become all even more object-y, like magically. So, all right, getting near the end, I guess. So is Moose a comic plot, like fluoride? Like, I'm trying to make it sound so great because I'm like, just like sell it more so there's more, more people use it. But it has downsides, obviously. If your code is, is like, I don't know, just meant to be extremely fast, and that's like really all that matters. It could take developers years to write 3 lines of code as long as it's super duper fast. Like, obviously you're not going to use Moose, but nowadays, and just for different things like a slide presenter or scripts that might run or whatnot, you can use it. It's not as slow as people say either. I mean, especially if you start to compare it to, languages that provide these features. I mean, it's just, but there's a compile time penalty. There's new stuff to learn, obviously, but it's like in the process of learning how Moose works, you probably, if you're not doing tons of object-y stuff, or if you're doing it and doing it wrong, then you would probably learn something. So I guess that's good. If you like a lot of the stuff Moo does, but you're willing to trade syntactic sugar for speed, you can use Moo, and I guess that's the cool kid thing to do. Don't use mouse and stuff. That's what I'm hearing from all the interwebs and talks that people are giving, because I guess he just, it's really good. And especially, like I said, it's compatible, so it's compatible with Moose. And that's a link to his talk, which is really interesting. All right, so what can you do? You can obviously start using Moose. You can patch Presentation Builder. It's on GitHub. So you can figure out how to use GitHub and, pull it down and patch it and push it up or do some pushy-pulley things. So stuff that would be cool is if it took different input and output formats. Like one thing, and I was talking about this with Doug earlier, was it'd be cool if it took your presentation, so you could do stuff in the HTML if you wanted it. So you could do some slides in the presentation and not, but then still want to just use snippets and do different things. And it could basically read in that HTML file and then do all of its magic to it and spit it back out. Or, something like that would be cool. Obviously, the images need improvements, and the wrapping and the tabbing and all that stuff, documentation and so on. All right. So if anybody remembers the movie, that's how it ends. He rides the nuclear bomb down to the... So that means it's over. Anyway, now that you know enough to be dangerous, go forth and Moose. Any questions?
What movie is that?
Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Highly recommended. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you very much. Get out of the way.